All right. We're back.
All right, we're back.
We are.
Stand in front of me, I will peck you.
We are back.
All right, let's get our esteemed guest.
They always say about.
Is he still in the queue, Jim?
Yes.
All right.
Say about
All right. If I understand things, we have the one and only the Godfather joining us tonight at Planet Green Trees. He's been here, got a couple great videos on our YouTube channel, predicting, if not everything that came true. Always glad to have him on here as a perspective of things. Please welcome the Godfather, Tim Beck.
Oh, well, such a pleasure to be back here again, Michael. Really enjoy your show. Yeah, I'm doing fine. I had to say I had a dinner engagement. I finally got back. I was listening to the tail end, about the last 10 minutes of your broadcast, and there was something about this drug driving that came up. And I have some thoughts about that. And I agree. It's inevitable. The community is going to have to deal with this issue. No way out of it. And I think that we do have, with that commission, we do have one, I think, very strong, credible person from our community that's a member of that group, Margot Bruner. I think all of you know who she is. And I have great faith in her. Again, she's maybe just one vote, but on the other hand, she's very, very smart. Now, what caught my attention, that being said, is that, well, if you had to put a level on how many nanograms, whatever, I mean, my own feeling would be no. Hey, F you. This is not even relevant. It's not even, material. It doesn't, mean anything because everybody's metabolism is so different. And that the standard that has to be proven would be impairment. However, if push comes to shove and the community gets boxed into a corner, one fallback position, I'm saying we should fight this to the bitter end, one fallback position would be a standard like in Colorado, where you've got, it's 5 nanograms, but on the other hand, you're going to have, and that's kind of sort of per se evidence where you can get arrested or something, but you go to court, you can fight it, okay? And there's a lot of people that got out of that police noose, after they were busted and everything like that, had over 5 nanos, but when it came to a jury trial or negotiations with a prosecutor, they dropped the charges. So that's just a generalized thought, I want to throw out there, because I think all of you are right. We're going to have to eventually, deal with this. But on the other hand, it's pretty crazy because, we have not had, it's not been a disaster. We have, 200 and some thousand medical marijuana patients. There is no per se limit for medical patients, but if you're a recreational user, God help you.
Yep.
It's zero, or at least that's what they say. Now, the way the law is passed, the way it's read, well, it's going to get litigated. No doubt about that, because we use the same language here. But there's always going to be some cop or some prosecutor that says, hey, F you, I don't agree. That's not really what it says, so we're going to court. And so it might, it could go in that direction. But that's a generalized thought, that I wanted to throw out and share with all of you. That's my response that I was thinking.
That's good thinking, is what that is. You mentioned, you said a word that sounded struck a chord, which is presumption. Maybe as a fallback, you do something like get that number as high as you can get it, And rather than talking about it as a per se limit, what it becomes is that if you hit 5 nanograms or 10 nanograms, I don't know the science. I don't know the numbers. Nobody does. It's voodoo science, but try to make it as big as you possibly can. And then what happens is effectively it becomes, probable cause. They get a presumption, right? Because it can then be rebutted by the defendant at trial. It's like, no, look, I'm an experienced medical. And you can tell the jury why it is that you're not.
But here's the problem with the number. Here's a major problem with the number. If you think about how, at one point, we talked about earlier, the alcohol level was not 0.08, it was 0.10. And before that, it was, I think,
0.15.
0.15.
Right.
Yep.
So,
and by the way,
and what drove that number down, fellas? Because it wasn't science.
0.5 in Utah.
You're right, and they said they were trying to do that recently in Michigan. And the last time they moved it, National Highway Safety said they weren't going to do it again. And it's all, and then what will happen is the federal government will withhold funds unless they press the state government on that. But nevertheless,
Yeah,
the
you may get a federal. You may get a federal.
the main point I wanted to make is if somebody hears, anybody hears, a person blew a .19, let's say, there is a psychological response to what an individual, potential juror, even a potential drunk driver in the future or someone in the past, what it means. It has been built into our brains that is a number that's really, really high.
Yeah, it's fucked. You're
fucking drunk. You know, like that. That's just the way that the world. And this has been some of the greatest
drunk.
propaganda by the law enforcement community, right? Because nobody knows what goes into a breath test. They don't know what if you have certain conditions, medications, issues with your esophagus. There's different conditions.
Ate Mexican
and a
food
lot of
that
things
night,
have to happen in order for that to be valid. Yet, if I say .17, people think, or 9 or whatever, there's a visual of someone being really drunk. It's just been beaten into our conscience that that's the number. It's not even a chance to rebut it. It is presumptively there. You see what I'm saying? And that's the problem with a number. That once it's there, the program by law enforcement, click it or ticket, whatever. I mean, whatever it is beaten to your brain. You know what I mean? Not everyone used to click their seatbelt, but they do now. You know what I'm saying? For various reasons. But like, if you're aware of anything, it's because the police have beaten into you, and it becomes folklore, and then you can't beat it in a jury trial. I'd much rather have a chance to cross-examine a law enforcement officer on his skill set, training, and even maybe a counter expert on whether or not that test that he gave, that he's offering an opinion, if he's qualified as an expert, means that they're impaired from cannabis, and that caused him to, and he can identify something that's driving. I'd rather have a shot at that, whatever it may be. You know what I mean? And that's really the only fair way to play.
With all the motors testing grounds that the car companies have and all the universities, I think Kettering has a testing ground down in the middle of Flint. We ought to run some trials, man.
But here's the problem. They've tried this. The major study is by a woman named Marilyn Hoistis. She was hired by the federal government to do these tests, and they'd have, as they've been described, they have a federal camp site. People would show up there. They would smoke federal marijuana.
Oh, that's why there wasn't a problem.
1.3 and 0.26, like the Pat Miles, those numbers were from the Mississippi. So they would sit there and they would, in the environment where they have like cabins, they'd come out, they'd smoke, and they'd draw their blood, they get in a car and drive. This is not the real world. This is not the conditions by which these tests are being taken. It doesn't contemplate the fight or flight syndrome, the effectuation of an arrest, all of those things that go into the metabolism, effectuating the body's.
It's all
right, but it wouldn't be. How hard would it be to make a test? I go and I drive. I go out to this thing and I drive around the track.
We've already
tried this.
We've already
can't put a number on it.
We've already done.
Wait. 10 times, right? Am I impaired? I mean, it's an easy, simple thing to measure because remember, the crime here is not driving with 1.5 things in your fucking bloodstream. The crime here is driving impaired. You've got to prove that they're driving impaired.
What they should really do,
the best point is exactly what you brought up, is that there is no minimum for medical marijuana patients. Therefore, this is irrational, arbitrary, and there's no science behind it. So we can kind of cottywaddle with it, but